Today I was hoping to gain some perspective on the history of life on Earth and to see where us humans fit into that. I wanted to learn a little bit about evolution and a bit about how the fossilization process takes place. Going into this, we learnt a little bit in class about the history of life on Earth, about the structure of human skeletons versus animal skeletons, and a bit about evolution.
So firstly, I hope to look at some of the ancient fossils, learn a bit about the biodiversity of these surrounding biomes, gain an understanding of the process of evolution, and see some real life examples, and also hoping to see where we fit into the human life on Earth geological timescale. So before going into this, we learned a little bit about human life on Earth, the classification of organisms, we took a look at a few fossils, and we even looked at the evolution of skulls.
The West Coast Fossil Park is world renowned for its exceptionally well preserved fossil and faunal remains that date back to 5.2 million years ago. The oldest fossils are from the Cenozoic era and Pliocene period. Mining started in 1943. They have the fossils of bears, saber-toothed cats, short-necked giraffes, and many other exotic animals.
This phosphate comes from the phosphate. Now, this phosphate is from all the marine stuff. The plankton and all that make the phosphate layer.
Around about 16 million years ago, sea level was high and it covered all of this area. Then we had a lower period, around about 5 million years ago. Fairly low, not completely as low as it is today. It was about 20 meters higher than it would be today. After that, the sea came back up again. It covered this to a depth of about 120 meters, which means all of this was sea. During the time when the sea level was low, that's when the fossils were formed.
We actually found a skull cap of an archaic human. It's basically the last humanoid species of the Stone Age. The top part of his skull. Right next to that we also found stone tools like a hand ladle. That has also been dated to the 400,000 year period.
That's incredible.
At Langebaan we also found footprints of a female humanoid species known as the footprints of Eve. She's been dated closely to the modern day man to 117,000 years. If you have a look at the sand that we still find around here, these orange and red specks that you see over here is the remains of the phosphate layer that was found over here, that was found on top of these bones. This is what the mine actually processed. Like in this tunnel over here, the only bear species was found south of the Sahara in Africa. This whole skeleton was found over here. Up until today there hasn't been any other discovery of this bear species worldwide and also in Africa as a whole.
Okay, what we have here is a typical paleontological dig site. So when the mining guys left here, this area would have looked something like what you see behind you there. Okay, and if you look carefully on that ground, you'll see bones sticking out of the soil. Every grid block gets a number.
Paleontologists start digging with a trowel. However, they have to be very careful not to damage the fossils, as scratches or dents could be confused with bite marks or injuries. As they get closer to the fossils, they use a smaller trowel followed by a soft plastic spade. Finally, as the paleontologists are removing the last pieces of rock and dirt, they use dentist picks and paintbrushes, being as careful as possible.
There have to be perfect conditions for fossils to form. In the West Coast area, there were floods in which the animals drowned, leaving their carcasses exposed to predators. The predators ate the meat, leaving the bones behind. Another flood deposited sediment on the bones, protecting them from oxygen which would otherwise cause them to decay. Over time, more sediment is deposited on top of the fossils, while bacteria eats out the bone marrow, replacing it with sediment. Over millions of years, the bones hardened in rock, forming fossils.
Paleontologists are trained to identify bones so that they can easily identify the type of bone and thus the type of animal. The West Coast area was home to two rare species. Firstly, the short-necked, long-horned giraffe, also known as the Civithera, and it weighed almost 1,500 kilograms. Secondly, the park was home to the African bear. The bear would have migrated from Europe and is the only known type to do this. We know it was not a lone bear because they have found multiple fossils of multiple animals.
Over the years, the human skull has evolved drastically, particularly the foramen magnum, which is a cranial cavity situated at the base of the brain through which the spinal cord passes. The spinal cord is responsible for linking the brain to the organs of the body by carrying sensory information to the brain, where it is interpreted and thereafter sent as motor information to the effector organs. The major advancements in hominid evolution were mouth development, brain size, and bipedalism hunting. There were also changes to the teeth and jaw. Over time, the teeth and jaw reduced in size as humans were eating softer, cooked foods. The pelvis grew smaller and the femur's insertion angle changed over time as a result of bipedalism.
Whatever he eats and he can't digest, so the feathers and the bones and he's made so little go in his throat and then he spits it out again.
The barn owl pellets that you see on your table was found here. We had a family of 5 babies and the mother and the father. So we picked up all their pellets and we brought it here for you guys to sort out.
Wow.
Okay, so then what you have in front of you is your mask and your gloves.
Owls mostly eat small rodents, birds, and bugs. However, they cannot digest fur, teeth, feathers, and some insect parts. These remains are compacted into small pellets that are regurgitated by the owl. Pellets give us insight into an owl's diet beyond what we can see through its excrement. I think my highlights of today's experience are probably the owl pellets, being able to sort through and see what owls eat, going to an excavation lab, which is sort of like a childhood dream, pretending that you're a paleontologist. And then my last highlight was probably learning about all the animals that used to live here, like a short-necked giraffe or the African bear.
So my highlights from today were definitely seeing the evolution of humans, reconstructing a rodent from owl pellets, and going to the dig site and sorting through millions of year-old fossils.
Today was an amazing experience and I learnt a lot. 5 facts that I learnt. Firstly, I learnt that we had bears in Africa, which is kind of amazing. Secondly, we have short-necked giraffes. Thirdly, I learned that fossils aren't actually bones, they get turned into rocks over time. 4th fact is that owls can't digest most of the food they eat, so they end up having to regurgitate things like feathers and bones, and those turn into owl pellets. And lastly, the majority of stuff that we know about the park is all based on assumptions.
My 5 favorite facts are that the first modern human fossil was found 160 million years ago, and that owls can't actually digest all their foods. They have to regurgitate some of this in the form of an owl pellet. They also have to be very careful in cleaning up the fossils, and they're not able to use high pressure hoses because that would damage the fossils too much. Also, the word gorilla actually translates to hairy woman in ancient times. Also, if the animal dies and the skeleton is left in open air, it will actually decay because it's exposed to oxygen. And that's why it's so vital that the fossils go under the ground.